Hello and welcome to our Aero Media podcast. This is a video edition. If any of you are actually watching this on YouTube or on one of our channels, but we're also going to have this available on our podcast. So some of you might just be listening. For those of you just listening, I'm Mr. Crawl, and I am joined today by Mr. Alaman, one of our fellow music teachers.
Hello.
Yes, and Declan Wicks, a research associate with the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. Did I get that
Hello, and
right?
thank you. Yes, that's it. It's quite a name. We call ourselves NASA, but we it's hard to say sometimes. So
Yeah, no, I get it. Thanks for joining us. So for those listening at home, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, what maybe what path you did in school through college and got you to where you are today. That's probably a long speech, but go for it.
for sure, thanks. Well, thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to be here. So I grew up in Ohio, Bowling Green, Ohio, up in the Northwest. And I think probably like a lot of people started in elementary school, had music classes that I really loved, and then had a music teacher who was like, "Hey, you should play trombone." I was like, "You know what? Why not? Let's go for it." And fell in love with the instrument. And so played through middle school, through high school, and really, engaged in extracurricular activities when I had the opportunity. Also worked through drama, loved playing with, the orchestra that we had for musicals, as well as, acting a little bit. And then realizing that I enjoyed playing an instrument so much that it was worth going to college for. So like your teachers went to university for it. Ended up starting as a music educator with your teacher, Mr. Alaman. But unlike
Ah,
Mr. Alaman,
there's the big secret.
yeah, there's the
For those of you listening, this is how Declan agreed to meet with us because probably Mr. Alleman has some secret on him and
yes, the inside connection.
We
Um,
just we just went to school together, went to college together.
yeah,
Became
yeah.
good friends.
So yeah, it was great. Met the first year as music educators. Unlike Mr. Alaman, I realized that music education was not necessarily for me after that first year. Um, but I wanted to remain engaged in arts and culture. Wanted to remain engaged in playing my instrument. So I pivoted and went with a world music degree, which not every university offers, but it's essentially a musicology degree. And so if you're looking, I don't know if you're out there looking at different majors, musicology is one where you do a bit more of studying what arts and culture mean to people, what the texts look like, maybe a bit more music theory, if you're into that kind of nerd stuff, but really enjoyed the degree and got a lot out of it. And it was able to put me in a place where I could still engage with arts and culture outside of making my living by just playing the trombone or engaging with music educators or being in an ensemble. So after college, I went and actually interned with a place out in Washington, D.C., doing a little bit more focus on the world stuff. So I did an international studies internship and then ended up with the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. That's a long way of saying we're a membership organization for state arts agencies. So every state has a government agency or government body that is dedicated to promoting arts and culture in their state. So for Ohio, it's the Ohio Arts Council. They're a great resource, both for programs for teachers and programs for young artists and all the way up to the creative aging. So we serve them. I do research. I'm a research associate. So we look at best practices, we look at data, and we say, how do we best make good best practices? So like best grant making practices, best programming available to all the state arts agencies so that they can then give it to their constituents. So that's where I am now. I think that was a bit long-winded, but I hope that answered your question.
Good answer, yeah.
We here in Ashland have a great connection with the Ohio Arts Council because they've provided quite a bit of grant money our way to do different projects. So currently we call ourselves in the arts the AVPA, so the Ashland Visual and Performing Arts. And through that, we've used grant money from the OAC to fund special guests, different artists, commissions to bring in. We had a full-time dance instructor for a couple years through their grant making. And so Donna Collins is one of our good friends here in Ashland. And I know that you're familiar with her because she's now the chair of your board of directors. Is that right?
She is. Congratulations to Donna Collins. That's very exciting to have her as our new board chair. So
Yeah, that's a win for anybody's board of directors anywhere at
yes,
any time. Donna will get things done.
yes. So it is wonderful. No, and it's a nice example too of, state arts agencies are kind of this government body that you don't necessarily hear about and don't realize have real opportunities to help a lot of arts across states. So it's exciting to hear that you're receiving grant money through that program.
Yeah, we stay well connected with them. And what I like what you're talking about is what we're trying to convince students that are interested in the arts, love the arts, whether that be music, dancing, theater, visual arts, graphic design. I mean, we've got the whole gamut here in the Ashland City Schools. But a lot of them maybe they love the arts, but have been told from a young age, whether that be by friends and family or just put it in their brain because that's the way you do it. That's not a career. That's just something we do on the side for fun. And so what we've been trying to highlight in the last couple of years, and we've done it through career fairs and guest artists and things, to say students can actually create a career based on what they love. And that can be anything from the creative to the performer to the administrator or artist. So we're really glad to have you here because you're still in that creative artsy world, but you're doing it from an administrative standpoint. So I was wondering, as a research associate, what does that kind of mean for you? You're still in the arts, you're still working for the arts, in the arts, through the arts, all those great things, but it's you're like in a support capacity in a sense. You're helping others achieve those goals. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to the kids about what that kind of means in your role at the NASA.
Yeah, yeah, NASA. I think you said it perfectly. I get to work with the things I love, which is arts and culture, in a support role. And then I get to, on my own time, keep practicing trombone, much to the chagrin of my neighbors, working on playing with hopefully auditioning for a regional orchestra or local orchestra soon. But I get to day in and day out be a part of this huge arts ecosystem that is statewide, nationwide, international. So for me, that means, I get a bit more as a research associate, I get a bit more into the data side of it. So I get to look at like economic data around the economic production of artists, which is fun to see and it's exciting to see. So to plot a quick stat, in the US, over $1 trillion of our gross domestic product comes from arts and culture. That's nearly 4.5% of all GDP. So when we say there are careers in the arts, we mean it. I think that employed means nearly 4.8 million people across the US are employed in a capacity that supports the arts. So it's huge. It's out there. You don't have to be a performer. You don't have to be a dance instructor. You can really find your passion and your calling in a way that supports the arts as well.
So that 4.8 million is just people doing a job like yours. They're not music teachers. They don't play in an orchestra. They're not painters.
Well, it'll include music educators as well.
Okay,
painters,
sure.
it's all of it. So
okay.
all of it.
But
yeah.
Even still.
Yep. So it's out there.
Okay.
It's up to museum workers as well. So all of that whole spectrum.
Thinking recently, the news has had a lot about the actors union and the writers union that have gone on strike for a myriad of reasons. And that's not why I'm bringing that particular thing up, because I think they've figured out what they needed to get. And I think those have all ended by the time we're talking now. But the reason I bring that up is the news was talking about just how many different careers and people were affected by the actors not working or the writers not writing. And I thought that was fascinating to see just how many career paths are connected to those. So when they had the writer's strike, the actors couldn't work because there was nothing written for them to act. And then the folks that are running the audio had nobody to run mics for, and then the people running cameras had nobody to film, and then it kept going, the places that rented out the props and the supplies and the costumes, and then the companies that provided the meals for the actors. And it's such a huge amount of things that work in that industry. And we were just talking about the larger sort of Hollywood sort of component. And then so I was thinking, when we branch that out, if we think about, like, for us, probably the closest, largest, like, big symphony would be like the Cleveland Orchestra. Just how many people does it take to make that function at the level it does, beyond the number of people on stage at the moment? And there's a lot of the behind the scenes thing that I don't think people get. So I'm glad you brought that up. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, you're good. Exactly. It's huge. I mean, and beyond even the orchestral players, you've also got, this is something I work with a lot, but grant makers and grant writers. So arts and culture across the US is funded a lot by private dollars. So, patrons who come and pay money to see the orchestra play. But running an orchestra is a huge endeavor. And so that's where the state comes in, that's where private donors come in. And so you have people who are grant writers who ask for money so that they can put on these really important arts and cultural events, symphonies, plays, etc. So that's a whole nother side of it where lots of money moves through. And there are people that get to, say, hey, I love the music that the Cleveland Orchestra plays. How do I play a role in making sure they keep being able to produce it?
Yeah. And I think when I tell students when they're going that path, I say, think about just our school. All right, so our school has roughly 1,000 people in it, just the high school. And what are we doing here? We're teaching kids a myriad of things. So we've got, and I don't know the numbers, but let's say we have 45 staff members all teaching, and we're teaching these kids, but that's not what makes the school work, right? It's also the custodians, the administrators, the secretaries, the cooks, the aides, et cetera, et cetera.
Drivers.
This goes down the line. So we try to talk about in things that the students are aware of and see regularly, and then we say, now think about what does it take to create something else, an album, a gallery exhibit, that kind of thing. We were lucky enough last year during our career fair to have a graphic designer come in that worked for just one town over for Certified Angus Beef. So a company that makes really good burgers and steaks.
Yeah. Don't quote me on this. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, I think graphic design is one of Ohio's top 5 arts industries as well. So it's huge because just like that, it's part of everything.
Yeah, and it was he's like, I just loved art and I loved design, and I went to college and I had no idea what I was going to do. I never would have thought I was going to work for a place that sold beef, but his job is to create menus, billboards, stuff for websites. It's everything he always wanted to do. But so many companies are hiring these people, advertising, they're hiring jingle writers, they're hiring people to put spots on the internet for different events and things. And they're looking for those creative people that go beyond the average everyday job. So when Mr. Alleman and I were chatting about this a couple months ago, like we have over the last year or so, he was like, you know what? I got a buddy that does stuff that's beyond performing and painting and goes deep in that. And so we're really pumped to have you here.
Yeah, thanks. This is great. I think one thing you said that I wanted to touch on is this idea of arts and it's the idea that, like, beyond arts and culture and playing your instrument, creativity is a real asset, and that's something you're cultivating when you play your instrument, when you're improvising on a jazz solo, when you're performing ballet or at the theater. Creativity, and I don't want to just say it's a job skill, because creativity is so important to who we are and to being human. But there is a real asset that comes from being creative at your work. And right now at the federal level and at the state level, there are huge pushes to imbue other sectors with creativity. So we look at transportation of all things, highway administrations, your car manufacturers, who are like, how do we take arts and culture and make our world safer and make our world more enjoyable to move through? Or if you're thinking about the environment, arts and environment, how do we push forward messages that help people understand the basics from recycling to large scale changes? It's really exciting, and it has such an impact across so many different sectors.
I want to throw Mr. Allman, put him on the spot for a second.
I'm ready.
I was thinking, so every college is different on the level that they prepare musicians and artists and things like that for the real world. I know when I went to college just like 3 years ago, wait, no, it was like 30 years ago. When you became a performer, they got you ready for that, but they didn't really get you for the world that a performer lives in, right? And Mr. Alama, not too long ago, like just pre-COVID, finished a performance degree for his master's degree, and I just didn't know. Did they do anything in your grad school that prepared you as a professional beyond the playing? The business side of it, the extra things that are entailed if you were to go out and perform, as opposed to getting a teaching job that's a steady job?
Yes. So I got my master's degree in saxophone performance at Kent State University. Shameless plug there.
I wasn't going to call that out just in case they didn't help you. But you just
did.
called
No, I
it.
did. Yeah, so I was encouraged to do a couple of things. So one was to make sure that I had materials ready to present, like if I wanted to play with someone, to make sure I had my my CV ready to go along with my resume, to have my CV of every group I played with, every important solo I took, this, that, or the other, doing competitions, this, all those things. So making sure I had my CV in order. Making some of my teachers would make sure that we would getting ready for studio teaching or lessons teaching. Like I had a class that was basically saxophone rep and pedagogy that was just trying to help us prepare if that was our path, because some people might do a master's in performance because they might want to go into a doctorate to teach college. So it was more of like how to run a studio and how to teach lessons, best practices for private instruction, things like that. So I've been using those, but for teaching middle school and high school students privately. And then also getting a little bit of experience trying to brand myself, getting, those sort of like getting a headshot, putting on a poster, when I made my recital posters, or making my, a poster that's, hey, take lessons from me, yada, yada. Here's this little blurb about with the price over here, that kind of stuff. It wasn't the most. It was just a little sprinkling. Most of it was practicing and getting ready for my recitals. But there was some expectation in my master's program where they knew that there's a step beyond, and some people that do what I did don't become music teachers. They probably want to become performers, or play in an orchestra, play in a band, be a college professor. So there was some of that baked in, but a lot of higher degrees, you can kind of pick what you did. Like I took conducting lessons because I knew I wanted to, be a better conductor to be able to conduct high school, middle school. And I also, in grad school, so for the students listening, in college, you get more free time-ish. Like you get more time to, you have more time to divvy up, and you have to decide, when am I going to eat lunch? And then I have class, and then I'm going to eat dinner, and then I have quartet rehearsal, and then I have this, and then I have this rehearsal. It kind of bounces around. And in grad school, it gets even more open. So I would use some of my mornings to drive to the next town over and go teach some middle school students, because I didn't have any class at 9:30 to noon. So I would just go to a middle school and then help their saxophones with a sectional or whatever, and then drive to a different middle school. It would be like every Tuesday or something. Maybe it was Tuesday or Thursday. I don't remember. So I got to kind of create some of my own opportunities to prepare myself for what I was going to do. But if I was going to do a different path, I might, have done a couple things differently.
So I've got 3 children, Declan, and The youngest is a senior in high school. And my middle child, Clara, went to Capital, which is in Columbus, Ohio. And my youngest wants to go to Ohio State as of the fall of his senior year. And both of them, Clara studied music. Harry wants to study music. And one of the important questions I always ask college profs on visits when it comes to the arts, and this could be for somebody going into music, somebody going into visual arts, graphic design, 3D, 2D, whatever. As a dancer, you want to ask the hard questions. And my hard question is always, what are you going to do as a department to keep my child from living in my basement till they're 50, right? Because you could be the best. My son's a bass player, so the best bass player on the planet doesn't matter if you don't have any gigs.
Mm-hmm.
So they talk about the connections they make and the schooling they give to both advocate for themselves and to be proactive to seek out those opportunities. And I think it's important that our students know that I'm going to encourage any student to pursue that creative avenue that they love, that they're good at, but remind them that those opportunities don't just appear. You don't become the lead trumpeter for the Cleveland Orchestra because you just want it. You have to go and seek out that there's an opening, and you have to practice, and you have to audition and that sort of thing. And that's going to be true no matter what avenue you go. You're going to have to interview, but it might be an artistic portfolio review. It might be a performance review if you're a musician, that sort of thing. And along the way, there's so many advocates and agencies that you work with that can help that along. In Ohio alone, besides the Ohio Arts Council, we also have the Ohio Alliance for Arts Education. It does an amazing job of connecting people with those opportunities, but also advocating for creating those opportunities. So like Donna Collins and Jared Hartzler, who runs the Alliance, are down in Columbus talking to legislators saying, let's make sure we have funding that we need so that we can offer these opportunities, so that we can have grants available, so that schools can hire artists to come in. And I want to tell, we've talked a bit about all the extra things that students can do that aren't just performing and drawing and dancing and those sort of things. But I want to encourage students that want to do that, but know they're going to have to work for those opportunities and seek them out, because they're there and people are advocating for you to do that. So that's kind of my high horse on that, I suppose. But I feel like I'm allowed to do that because I've got 2 children that are studying music or about to study music. And I'm like, I didn't say, well, that's stupid, go be an accountant.
Yeah.
I don't care if you want to be an accountant, but if you want to be a musician, go be a musician. And my oldest son is a history major, so that didn't help me in my retirement either. So I'm a big advocate for follow your dreams. And it sounds like, Declan, you did that, and it took you a year or so into college to realize you were on the right path, but there was a V or a Y at some point. And you're like, I'm going to try this avenue. I know I'm where I'm supposed to be. I'm studying the arts. I'm in this creative avenue, but I finally realized this exists, and that's where I should be. And it looks like you've landed there, hopefully the way you wanted.
Yeah, I don't know if I could say it's the way I wanted, just because I could have never expected this.
That's
the arts, fair. Yeah. So I love what I'm doing, but the arts ecosystem is so huge that you don't know what you're getting into. So I think, like you said, explore every opportunity that comes your way. I think of one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, writes about arts and culture in a little short story where he talks about his own path. And he says, what kept me going was the idea that in the distance was a mountain just over the horizon, and I could see just the peak when I started out. And no matter which way I was going, as long as that mountain got a little bit bigger with every step, I knew I was going in the right direction. And I think that for me is really useful to think about. It is, as long as I'm kind of going somewhere in the right direction, I'm going to get there eventually. And I think the same goes for arts and culture. Do what you love, explore all the opportunities that come your way, and you'll slowly get closer to that mountain. So
well, that's fantastic. I want to thank you for meeting with us today. I'm sure you're busy.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Alamon's busy, but we're just excited to have this little moment to talk about career paths and the arts. I think we're always excited to talk about that. So thanks again for coming out. And we hope you enjoyed our segment and our podcast, whether you saw it or just heard it or both. Thanks again for coming out.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks, Declan.